Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. So, when's the last time that you went to somebody else's farm, somebody else's field, learned from the different things that they were doing, absorbed some new information, seeing maybe some different practices out there, maybe in your neck of the woods, maybe somewhere else? But either way, just went and tried to learn more. If you don't catch on to what I'm putting down right now, it's called a field day, right? The same could be true for a ranch as well. Maybe it's called a range day. Maybe it's called a pasture day. I don't know. But either way, we're taking this concept of going to somebody else's farm or ranch to see their operation, to see some of the different things that they're doing, and try to take something home back to our own operation. See if we can learn something from them. Or even in that process, while we're meeting up with maybe other people are there, learn from the people that are there and network. I think there's a lot of value in agriculture around this topic of a field day. And so as I record this, we're sitting at the beginning of August, definitely in the middle of field day season. Field days kind of start, beginning of spring even, spring, and then I'll go all the way through the summer. I actually just had the opportunity to go up to South Dakota, to Baltic, South Dakota, to the Hefty field day, or the Ag PhD field day, I should say. And it was a really good opportunity to go up there and learn, see their farm, see the different things that they've got going on. Obviously, lots of different trials that they have got going on. But then, like I just mentioned before, the benefits sometimes of going up there are the networking side of things. I'd say whenever it comes to a field day, whenever it comes to any sort of event really that's going on that I maybe sparks my interest in going to, I feel like sometimes we have it in our head that we have to get so much value from these events. The perceived likelihood of value that we get from an event like this or a field day or somebody else's field day or just any sort of event, even in the wintertime, we've got this in our mind of what kind of value that we're going to get. And I feel like the expectations are usually for an overwhelming amount of value. Like, I'm going to go to this field day and I'm get this overwhelming amount of value that's just going to blow our operation out of the water. I'm going to pick up so many different things. It's going to be so worth my time. And I'm going to feel like just on top of the world after it's all said and done. And by the way, there are probably events like that. But most generally, I feel like we over anticipate. Our expectations are too high when it comes to a lot of these different events. And we feel like if we don't walk away with a just extremely overwhelming amount of value, like it was a waste of our time. And I feel like if we go into an event like that, our expectations are going to be let down. That's just kind of the reality of it, because oftentimes we over expect what we're actually going to get out of things. And so what I think when it comes back to reality is, if we go into an event like this, if we can just really pick up one simple thing that could be very, very impactful to the operation, that is ultimately enough to kind of have that high ROI or high ROT, I should say, on our time to go to an event like this. And I'm the same way, because often I'll look back after an event and I'll ask myself, was it worth my time? Maybe. Would I go again? I don't know. And so I feel like this was one of those events where I definitely would consider going again. And I guess what I'm getting at here is, a lot of times we might go there and just think we're going to get all this information. But then the kicker that's actually the most impactful is maybe that connection with somebody else at the show, at the field day, or just hearing that one little idea or concept that you kind of double click on, so to speak, and actually learn more about. So let's not just going to some of these different things and expect so much that we're actually let down. And then we're blindsided by the reality of getting let down, that we may not necessarily pick up a lot. So I think there's always something a guy can learn by going to somebody else's operation, by learning from somebody else's operation. And side comment here, when it comes to field days, I feel like field days are almost kind of nostalgic for me, because I'm kind of growing up in the era to where I went with my dad to a lot of field days. It was kind of a core memory at times. I can remember vividly lots of different field days that we went to, and it was always fun. There's usually always a meal involved, right? So, farmers love meals, farmers love talking to other farmers, and it's always a really good time. There's a lot to be said about those different events where we kind of get different minded people together, but also kind of collectively just trying to learn. And so, within that same concept of field days, I was thinking about this, and on our farm, I'm actually thinking about trying to host maybe just a very informal field day. But we do a few different things, and I think it's worth kind of talking about those. But rather than maybe going through that whole process of hosting an event like that, why not take the technology that we have and put it to use through what I'm going to call is an audio field day. It's audio because I'm not taking you through it with video. Maybe we'll get to that point at some point. This is something that I can kind of go through the different ideas that we've been doing on our farm, try to implement, and maybe just tell you about it. Obviously, it's less impressive and less eye appealing than being in person and having to, walk the fields and see things in first person, right? And see things for yourself. There's a lot of value in that as well, getting boots on the ground and seeing what things actually look like versus maybe even, well, let's just call it what it is, taking somebody's word. But with me kind of telling you about some of the different practices we have on our farm that we've been doing, but I'm trying to implement, the goal here for me is that way maybe you just take something that just kind of intrigues you and you want to learn more about, whether that's reaching out to me or reaching out to somebody else. Maybe that's just something that you can pick up from what I'm going to be talking about here is basically going through this audio field day, right? So maybe there's just some idea that you can take back and you can learn. Back to what I just mentioned earlier on is maybe it's just those one simple thing. And by the way, by listening to a podcast, by doing this while you're off, spraying fungicide on the beans or the corn or driving around checking crops or whatever you're doing, putting up hay this time of year, right? We're not investing a lot. So that's one of those things where I feel like sometimes when you don't invest as much, it's pretty easy to get that high ROT on your time. Furthermore, if we want to kind of learn more about some of the different things that I'm doing, somebody else say did the same thing, well, then let's reach out to them. Then let's have a more in-depth conversation. Let's see what's kind of going on. If there's something that really piques your interest, well, then let's kind of, like I said, double click on that, so to speak. Disclaimer here, before I get into some of these different things that we're talking about, gotta be willing to say this. Hey, I'm not a researcher, by the way. We try to do things on the farm. I'm not a researcher, not exact science behind a lot of things that we're doing. I just like to try new things. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there before we dive into this. If you start screaming at the mic or your headphones or the tractor that you're in because I said something wrong or because I didn't do things right or maybe the way I should have. And by the way, I will also say this. Part of this would be great to have questions fired back at me so I can learn as well. That's the nicest thing sometimes about we maybe put somebody that has a field day knowing exactly what they're doing. Let's just go back to the example I used before. The Hefty brothers, Brian and Darren Hefty, and now they're the next generation, Zach, coming back into this. We maybe put them up on a pedestal, so to speak, because we think they got it all figured out. That's not the case by far. I think they'd be ones that are being willing to admit that they don't have it all figured out and they're willing to try new things. Okay. And so that's what I think is great is the only difference about, say, somebody who is having a field day is the fact that they're willing to share about it versus their neighbor down the road. And that's what I'm willing to do on our operation is just be willing to share about it in hopes, honestly, that I have other people that share their ideas and their opinions. And maybe they tell me I'm wrong and maybe they tell me what else I should consider. And by doing so, I am continuing to learn through that process. It's a two-way street, two-way conversation, even though this is only flowing through your headphones and you're not actually firing back at me. That's where I'm going to say right here, right now, hey, fire the questions back at me. Let's have these conversations. And if I do get to a point where I host maybe a really informal field day, by all means, let's come out to it. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing in our operation, that'd be a great time to kind of dive into it, see it firsthand, put your hands on the crop itself. So let's dive into this. Without further ado, the big one that we're trying this year that I've been really focusing a lot on or had a lot of intention on is our strip crop trial. So our strip crop trial, for those of you who don't know, strip cropping is when you just literally have strips of different crops right next to each other. So the way that we set this up this year is we had 8 rows of corn and 8 rows of beans on 30-inch rows, basically 20-foot strips. And so I'll give you a little bit example or a reason why we did that. Why? First off, well, it looks cool. That's not the reason. It just is a benefit. One of the reasons why I really wanted to try it is because I've seen other people do it. With anything that we do on our farm, I am not the pioneer, so to speak, in that I am the very first one. I'm going to die on this hill saying this, I created this. And nobody else can, everybody else that copies me is they did it second. No, that's not the case with our operation. Somebody else started this and I saw it, and maybe a few other people. I know one of a good friend of mine, Junior Fan still, who's done some strip cropping. If you pay attention to like Zach Smith, stock cropper, they've done some strip cropping. And so paying attention to different things that they're doing, different things that they're seeing is what really piqued my interest and got me interested in trying this. With the strip cropping, for those of you who don't know, we've got corn. Basically, corn is trying to maximize the sunlight. Any plant that we grow is just trying to maximize the sunlight. I was just thinking about this before. Farmers, we don't think about it near enough, but we are in the business of selling sunlight. We're trying to raise this crop, which grows off of sunlight and water and maybe some nutrients. With the corn, if you ever have like the edge row effect or the fence row effect or the ditch effect, whatever, that outside row gets all the sunlight. Those ears are a lot bigger and usually that yield is a lot higher. That's what we're trying to maximize with this strip crop trial here. And so we're putting less strips is usually more because then that lets more light into all those rows as many as possible. You know, if you go from a 120-foot strip, which is only a few rows on the outside edge actually getting that, and you break that down into a lot smaller strips, well, then you have a lot more rows within that same field getting that light. Now, the flip side of that is, anything that's in the middle of that, if you got a tall corn crop that's, 10 feet tall or whatever, then that crop right next to it's going to be shaded. So in this case, we have soybeans. Soybeans, honestly, in this case, was just kind of the easy go-to because of kind of the technologies that we have today. It'll be really curious. I think the soybeans can still kind of hang in there, but there's no doubt that there might be a couple rows in there that might have a little bit of a detriment because they're being shaded. So with this strip crop trial, we got corn and beans. So we took our 16-row planter and then we basically set that up. And the benefit that we have with this planter that we bought just a couple of years ago is it is a center fill planter, but it still has boxes. This planter came from seed cord country, so that way they could actually still plant their male and female rows, but it's still a center fill. So, if we want to go and put, beans in and go plant 80 acres, it's pretty easy to do that too. That's what's really nice. And so with that, we had the boxes on there. So basically how we set that up is we actually had corn on the outside rows. I had corn on the outside 4, and then I had beans right in the middle. And there really wasn't necessarily any rhyme or reason to that. And after talking with my good friend Junior there, one of the challenges that I think we are going to see is with having that on the outside rows, we are running RTK technology, so it's pretty straight, but it's not perfect. We're basically going to have that when we're coming back with our combine on 8-row head combine, it's going to be that middle is going to be right in the guest row. So they could be off a little bit. So that is going to be a trial and error, so to speak, to kind of see how that actually pans out there. That's how we set that up. And we have that benefit because we got the boxes, we can kind of do that and kind of set the planner up accordingly, right? Within that, a lot of people ask, okay, well, what's the population for corn? So we set it up so that way the 2 rows that would be on the outside edge capturing the most sunlight for the corn were planted at 40,000. And then the other 4 rows that were on the inside were planted at 28,000, which is kind of our standard dry land population. And so then the beans in the middle, we went ahead and I think it was right around 120,000 population for the beans, something like that. So within setting this up, and I will say it's a little bit tricky. Once again, we have the benefit of having a planter that's set up with precision planting technology. So we've got V drives. We can put some different plates in. So that's basically what we did. We put bean plates in the middle, corn plates on the outside, and we've got electric drives so we can variable rate that population per row. That's not that hard. What was really hard to figure out was to tell it that there was different plates or different crop that we're planting. I could not tell this Precision 2020 monitor. It's a Gen 2, by the way. I could not tell that we were planting basically beans in the middle. I had to tell it we were planting one crop, and then I had to somehow basically do the math to almost trick it into planting a different population in the middle. So I had to take kind of my discs that were in there and I had to kind of do some math. And honestly, I used AI to help me with this because it was a lot of math that I couldn't necessarily figure it out. And I was trying to do it in a short amount of time. And as we were setting this up and it just literally setting this monitor up, I called Junior and I was like, hey, how do you do this? And he's like, well, there's a way to do it. I can't remember it. I'm like, okay. So I went ahead and I just kind of started figuring out, started pressing buttons. And so I did actually record a video on that after we got done. So that way I remembered it for next year. And anybody else that might be in a similar situation, happy to pass that along as well. So anyways, got that all set up and that's how we planted it. And part of the reason why I put the corn on the outside edge was when I very first started, I had basically 4 rows. And so I wanted 4 rows of corn. And so like on my very first pass, I wanted 4 rows of corn versus 4 rows of beans. just because I knew the corn would take advantage of that sunlight a lot more than what the beans would. And so that's truly the only reason why I did that. Okay, that was really the only reason why I set it up that way. And so therefore, that's kind of how we did it. Came into the field. The field, the way we set it up is it was a 40-acre field. It wasn't 100% square, so I guess it was a little bit less than 40 acres, probably 38 acres. There's a little bit of a chunk kind of taken out of there. And so what I ended up doing was in the fall last year when I knew I was going to go into this trial is I planted rye all the way around the outside edges of this field. And I got to where I had, roughly a square section right in the middle. And that's why I kind of planted rye so I could kind of square it up. And then I shot for roughly 16 acres of rye on the outside. And then I could do the balance of kind of roughly that 24-ish acres of the strip crop trial in the middle. And then, roughly, if you figure even math, 12 and 12. That's kind of what the intention was. That's what the idea was. Well, what happened was when we had rye on that outside edges, and then on the middle where we were planning to put the strip crop, I actually had twin row triticale. So I wanted to put a cover crop in there, and I chose triticale because I like to put triticale ahead of corn. It's less carbon nitrogen ratio, so I figured it's going to compete less. It's a little bit slower, not quite as vigorous as rye, so it maybe does a little bit better in front of corn. That's what my intention was. I had planted the twin row in front of the corn in the strips. So hopefully you're following, obviously you can't see this, right? So picture a 40-acre field all the way around the outside. We've got the rye. In the middle, we've got the twin rows. But what happened last winter, we had a lot of wind damage to our cover crops. And meaning we had a lot of northwest prevailing winds that really just beat up our cover crops, especially if they were not highly established. And so what happened was a lot of the hilltops, because this is a little bit hilly, it's not a flat tabletop field. The hilltops got really a lot of wind damage. And then even on the east side, where I had the rye, the end rows on the east side got heavily damaged with the wind as well. So what I ended up doing this spring when we came in to plant this, I knew that if I didn't plant something on the east side, there would be very little growth from the rye, and it would not make very much seed, and it would be a lot of weeds, a lot of more weed seed than actual rye seed. So what I went ahead and do and actually sprayed that off on the east side when I sprayed off my triticale on the inside of my strips. Okay, so now instead of all the way around, it's just a horseshoe, basically around the south, west, and north sides of this field. And so then on the east side, I went ahead and just planted straight corn. So it kind of worked that, when we were planting this trial, I went ahead and it was right when we were switching over from beans to corn. So then we switched over our 8 corn rows and we still left our bean meters in there. And then we went ahead and we planted the strips. And then I came back and I took out the bean rows, put in the rest of the corn, and then I planted the rest of the corn on the end rows, and just to clean it up. So it wasn't necessarily my intention, but that's just kind of the way that it worked out. Now, when it comes to spraying this field, I had in my head that if I had rye all the way on the outsides, if I didn't have any end rows, basically it would be really easy this time of year to come into there and to do a foliar feed application or to do something else this time of year, because I basically wouldn't have any end rows. The rye would be combined. There may be a cover crop in there, but no big deal. But wasn't really thinking about was the rest of the year, in the spring or even in the summer when we're trying to spray and things like that. So, when basically that rye on the end, I plan to take this for seed. I don't want to run it over any more than what I have to. When we planted it in the spring, it worked out pretty good that, I think we planted right around the 4th of May when I looked up just before. And so it worked out that, we did run over that rye just a little bit with the tractor tires and the planter, but it was virtually unnoticeable. I mean, it all kind of popped back out of it, no big deal. And so that was kind of a learning curve, because now when I come back into spray, I would have to run over my rye, and I don't want to do that. So I basically end up kind of creating some cross rows and end row crossways inside of that kind of strip inside there. Not ideal, but it did work. The flip side of that, to fast forward a little bit, this time of year, now we did get a rye combined, and it was easy to come in there with the sprayer and spray like a foliar feed. But the problem was, now I've got corn on the east end rows. So if I want to go through the sprayer with the sprayer, I've got corn on the east end rows, because that was kind of my goal. Is I thought, okay, if we've got strips here and they're 20-foot strips, so we can still get through with the sprayer, and it's on 30-inch rows, so I can drive down my bean rows, not run my beans over with my sprayer. And it works out really good because we've got a 40-foot planter, 8-row strips, and I've got our sprayer's 120-foot boom. So I can go right down my bean strips, raise my boom all the way up, spray my foliar feed, whether it be a fungicide, insecticide, whatever it is, on my corn and my beans at the same time. And I just thought, well, this will work out pretty slick. That was kind of the intention of maybe the strip crop, is being able to make that application without having to have a special sprayer. And it did work, but I did have the corn on the east side. So I went ahead and I made it work. I just kind of ran through that corn for the current moment. It was over the top of the hood of the sprayer, but we got through it just fine. For this little bit of a strip crop trial, it worked just fine. Back to kind of planting. Overall, planting worked pretty good. Just trying to kind of figure out the populations a little bit tricky. The seed corn that we planted was a Pioneer 13777, so 13777, but it was a PCU, which means it has the enlist trait. And that was kind of the technology that I wanted to go after, because we were planting enlist beans. I can't remember. I think it was like a 2.8 bean, 2.9 bean, something like that. So that way I could come in and I could basically spray everything with the list and kind of keep everything. And really, that's what's made it nice to try something like this with the technology that we do have. Having corn with an enlist trait makes it a lot easier to kind of keep these fields clean. So we planted, and then we came back a couple days later and went ahead and sprayed my pre-emerge, which consisted of Anthemax, 240, Roundup, Fulvic, and Fulltech. So we throw Fulvic in on a lot of these passes because Fulvic, I think, really helps that weed take up that herbicide and really helps that weed, really just the effectiveness of that herbicide. And so the one thing I will say, the one thing that we learned, and this was more or less operator error, because I've had this question before, is, okay, what's your weed control like? Overall, pretty decent, but I kind of screwed up because my Anthemax rate was like a third of what it should have been. I was just thinking wrong in my head. We were doing it, I think it was later in the evening, and I just was trying to get it done. And I thought I had my rate right. I think I only ran like 1.5 ounces to the acre versus like 3 or 4, whatever it's supposed to be. But anyways, our Anthemax rate was not as high as what it should be. So our residual did not last very long. Therefore, we had to come back with our post pass a lot sooner. So we had a lot of weeds that came up pretty fast afterwards. Originally, it stayed clean, just not for very long. All right, so that leads me to my post herbicide application. So we came back with that. I can't remember when, but it was pretty shortly. It wasn't real long after, maybe like 2 weeks, 3 weeks after, probably 3 weeks after. So anyways, with our post, since we could run the enlist, we had enlist 1, we had Liberty, Warrant, Fulvic, Fulltech, and crop stress. Crop stress is basically to help that crop metabolize the herbicide pass. And so that was nice just because we could run basically our exact same bean post, with the exception of, well, the Warrant was a little bit different, but you still run that on beans. So that's what worked out really nice for that post. And for the most part, we added that Fulvic in there again. We had some pretty high water hemp in there, maybe had 10-inch water hemp, and we were able to kind of clean it up pretty good. Now, it's not perfect. There's some escapes, not going to act like it was perfect. Because that first pass didn't have that residual, because some of those weeds got a little bit bigger. We got some kochia in there that got away from us a little bit. But for the most part, pretty happy with how clean that stayed. On the fertility side of things, for this strip crop trial, this was something else that I was trying to rack my brain around and try to figure out how we're going to make this work. So for the fertility side, most of our soils, I guess, from an NPK standpoint, I guess what I'm trying to get at here was from a phosphorus and potassium standpoint, we really don't put much synthetics out there. Really not anything for this stuff anyways. So we went ahead and for our what I'm going to call our pre-emerge fertilizer, I went ahead and I kind of hit the easy button there too, is I basically just stream barred some nitrogen. So I think it was about 12.5 gallons of 32%, 3.2 gallons of thiosulfite, which is your sulfur. And then we had a nitro booster product in there and a stabilizer in there. Nitro booster is just to kind of help the simulation of the nitrogen, make it more efficient. And we streamed that on with the sprayer. I just did it across everything, including the bean ground. Obviously, it doesn't need it, but at that point, that was pre-emerge. I can't tell, besides doing the math, I couldn't tell where I had beans and where I had corn. And so I just did it across everything. Now, kind of similar to that when I came back with my post, this is where I was trying to rack my brain around, okay, how do we get our nitrogen out there without getting it on the beans that obviously don't need it? Yeah, I could have done the same thing and put it on everything, but that would be unnecessary. And so most of the side rigs around here, the one we used in season for ours was a 16 row. Well, that ain't going to work because then half of it's on beans. We got a neighbor that has an 11 row. Well, that could work, but then you're still going to have a couple rows on beans. And so what I went ahead and did wasn't perfect. There's kind of a trial and error, figure it out as we go, which I think has to be the mentality with doing something new, is just we'll figure it out as we go. I went ahead and took our sprayer, same thing, streamer tips, and I went ahead and I lined it up exactly where I would be driving down on the bean rows to kind of match my strips. And I just turned my nozzles on or off where they were supposed to be. There was, I think, one section right in the middle where I could turn the whole thing off. But otherwise, I just went and I turned my nozzles. Not ideal because when you're turning nozzles, not actually turning sections off, it kind of messes with the sprayer, at least our sprayer, anyways. It's an older sprayer, so we don't have individual nozzle control, which would be awesome for this. It kind of messes with the pressure, and I'm sure the rate was probably off a little bit as well. But either way, it was just a way to kind of get that nitrogen out there and stream it on. I want to say the crop at the time was maybe like V4, V5. So with streaming on nitrogen like that, there was a little bit of burn. So that kind of pass consists of about 20 gallons per acre total of nitrogen, 4 gallons per acre of that thiosulfate. And then we had nitro booster. I had some soluble in there and some liquid humic to kind of help with that burn. And then I did actually, because I was worried about the burn, I probably didn't need to. I still had some burn anyways. I went ahead and cut that down. I basically cut that with water. And then I put on 20 gallons an acre, but I doubled it. So I made 2 passes across the entire field, total 20 gallons per acre of that nitrogen. So that's kind of how I tried to cut that with water. I don't know if it necessarily helped the burn a lot, but either way, that's kind of why I did it. If I did in the past, I probably wouldn't cut it. That's how I did that with that. And that was kind of how we got around without having to stream nitrogen on the beans, just put it on the corn, and it seemed to work okay. Not ideal, but it did work. And so then the last thing that we've done since then was our foliar application. I mentioned that kind of before. And so our foliar application consisted of potassium acetate, sugar, boron, moly, kelp, and fulvic. I did not put a fungicide in there, did not put an insecticide in there. I thought worst case, if I do need to come back and make a rescue pass with the sprayer, I can do that pretty easy. So that is, I guess, kind of in a nutshell, brings us up to speed as to this strip crop trial and what we've done within this trial. And honestly, it's worked pretty well. For the first year doing this, I'm pretty happy. It's one of those things to where, man, I wish I farmed along a highway, and I wish this was actually closer to the road. This is like the 40 in the middle of the section. That's just how it worked out. We had planned to take that field and go to rye with it anyways, so that was kind of the compromise. So that's how we set it up. I wish it was closer to the field because I like making the neighbors turn their head. But either way, you can see it from the road. It's just off in a distance, and I'm sure it's got people wondering, well, geez, what's going on out there? Did he forget to spray something, or did he have something messed up with his planter? I had somebody ask me one time, what is that strip crop out there? You got corn and beans growing together? And I said, yeah, I forgot to clean half the planter out. And they're like, seriously? I'm like, well, I'm sure that's happened before, but in this case, it was intentional. And I am pretty excited to see how it turns out. And I just pulled some ears off of that just before. So hoping to maybe, do some stand count, see what we ended up with the final stand, take some of the ears, do some checks as far as, where we're sitting at from a potential yield standpoint. It's so hard to guess at this stage in the game, though. And I will say, kind of some thoughts moving forward. And I know harvest is going to be an interesting one because, and this was another reason why I was trying to wrap my brain around. So combining the strips, 8-row head, that'll work out pretty good, hopefully. I'm a little bit concerned about that guest row in there, but I did my best coming in to make sure it was square so that way we could run the RTK and it would be pretty close. So hoping that's not too big a deal. But the thing I was trying to figure out is the beans. How are we going to combine the beans that are a 20-foot strip? We got a 35-foot draper head. I don't know how that's going to work. And the funny thing is, and I was actually, so side comment here, I was telling my landlord about this. Landlord is, man, he's in his 90s. And then it's his son too as well. And we've been farming his ground for years. And I had him out last fall. He was riding in the combine. It was a pretty cool experience. And I was telling him, and he was sharing the farm that we were combining, that he used to combine that same farm with a 5-foot head. I just thought that was so cool, but it was interesting. I told him it's ironic because you combined this farm, obviously decades ago with a 5-foot head. I'm trying to do this trial where I want a 20-foot head or less, and I can't find one. There's hardly anybody around here anymore that has anything less than like a 25-foot head. And so it's just kind of interesting how times change, right? And so ironic there as well. But anyways, with this strip, I guess as of now, my thought was to literally just combine the corn first, probably take it out a little bit wetter, let the beans stand until we get the corn combined. And then, if we have to take it with our head, It's not going to be pretty, but maybe we can take it. Even if we take the stocks in, probably not the end of the world. Otherwise, more likely what I think we're going to try doing is trying to find somebody that has like even a 20-foot head or 22-foot head that we can borrow, or heck, even for this example, it's like 10, 12 acres. Let them come in and combine it, and so if we got somebody that even has a 22-foot head, might catch like one row, maybe they can come in and just combine the beans or something like that after the corn is off. So that's kind of my thought process there. In the future, what I'd really like to figure out is a way to harvest whatever's in that middle, that maybe have like an oats or a rye or something in the middle, combine that, come in and drill a cover crop in the middle there. And then all of a sudden in the fall, you got a huge cover crop that you can run cows on, and you got the corn stalks right next to it. Lots of different ideas. We could talk about this 7 ways till Sunday on how to do this. And there's lots of things to consider as well. So I'm just telling you some things that we've learned with this strip crop trial, some things that we've done, and how we went about it this year as the first year, kind of the pilot year that we're trying this on our farm. So anyways, my intention was to go into some of the other different practices that we're doing on our farm. And I intend to do that as well. But I think for this one, for the sake of time and for the sake of you getting tired of listening to my voice, I think we'll call this good. I think we'll just kind of wrap it up here on the strip crop trial for this time. And I'm going to go in probably next time that we talking about continuing this virtual field day, this audio field day, if you will. And I would love to hear your response on if you liked this, if you liked me talking about stuff that we're doing on our farm. I don't always get into the production side of things. And there's the economics that follow suit. And we get kind of need to dive into that, but it's always easier to do that kind of after the fact once we kind of have final numbers. And so we definitely need to dive into that. But tell me if this is something that you like, learning about what we're doing on our farm and really tying that back to something that you can learn as well. And would love to kind of hear if there's anything that you think we could do differently. And that's part of this two-way conversation so I can learn as well. But I think maybe next time what I'm hoping to go into is the non-GMO corn that we're trying on our farm, the twin row cover crop, the cover crop in front of corn, the cover crop in front of beans, even our small grains, and even like our reduced nitrogen and different things that we're doing with that as well. And so I think we'll save that for next time. But either way, I appreciate you listening today. I hope that the season's going well for you. I hope that you've maybe had the chance to get out to attend a field day or learn from somebody else. If not, there's definitely a lot of value a guy can pick up from that, or even off season in the wintertime, if we can kind of go to different meetings and network with other farmers and ranchers, there's a ton of value that we can pick up from that. And back to the beginning is let's not overextend that expectation that we're going to pick up this overwhelming amount of value. Rather, just be within the expectation that there just might be one simple thing that you could do or change on your farm or take back to your farm that could quite literally change the dynamic of your farm. It could be really simple. It could seem really minor at the beginning, but sometimes it's these little changes that we pick up here and there that actually make the biggest difference in the long run, especially when they're compounding and we add them all up over time. So that's all I got for this week's episode, folks. Enjoy the rest of your summer and stay safe, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.